graduated and only an attorney at law. I graduated as from the High Court. But it's a great pleasure to welcome Sri Rakesh Ji Gupta. And it's also a pleasure for me because I would be, I'm not an income tax lawyer, but then we are all concerned with reassessment and charitable trust. In fact, I keep on getting notices of reassessment every year on some issues or other, and I keep on fighting with my chartered accountant that ये क्या चीज के लिए आ गया, ये किस लिए आ गया, अब ये reassessment किस लिए हो रही है, ये खर्चा क्यों अलाउ नहीं हो रहा है, and हम लोगों को पैसा we have to keep on fighting and deposit the money and prefer an appeal. नहीं सर, अपील करिए, पैसा जमा कर दीजिए, बस जीत जाएंगे. तो क्वेश्चन इज हम लोग शुरू में हारते क्यों हैं, फिर जीतते क्यों हैं, ये समझ में आना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है. बट एनीवे दिस थिंग गोज ऑन. और अब ये चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट भी हम लोगों को सभी के पास चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट रहती हैं, एंड वी ऑल यूज हैव चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट टू some kind of a charity, either big or small. I also manage some charitable trust in my father's name, in the name of my relatives. I am also involved with some of the other charitable trust as a trustee, and now I find that we have to ask for a registration of those charitable trusts, and without those registration, your exemption under section 12 will go away. So it's a very interesting segment. Most of the people who are present here are concerned with reassessment. They would be concerned with charitable trust. So it will be a very interesting session. So we would be very keen to hear Rakesh ji. He has been a member of the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal with a deep knowledge of income tax law. So I welcome him, and we really sincerely hope and believe that we will go more enriched after this session. Thank you very much, Rakesh ji, for participating and giving your valuable time to speak to our members. May I now request Mr. Surana to speak a few words, please.
डॉक्टर
सुराना जी,
हाँ सुनाई दे रहा है ना?
हाँ दे रहा है सर.
गुप्ता साहब, श्री सरावगी जी, श्री खेतान जी, friends and guests. Our senior vice president Sri Khetan ji has already introduced our learned guest speaker, Dr. Rakesh Ji Gupta, who can guide us on any subject relating to tax. I must add that at this critical phase of second wave, when the third is also on the way, COVID has written many lessons. During the global lockdown imposed by the government on people due to outbreak of coronavirus COVID-19, human beings were forced to stay home and follow through restrictions. They turned to poetry, singing for self-recollection. However, Dr. Rakesh Gupta is already nowadays writing Hindi poetry on Mahabharat Prasanga of Jayadratha Vrad. We are therefore can expect to listen his masterpiece during his deliberations on the highly critical and technical subjects, reassessment and charitable trust. Immediately after the presentation of budget, we have submitted a detailed memorandum, but the close-by-close analysis and detailed outline how to handle these subjects are big questions. I would now like to present some important issues in query format for more clarifications from Dr. Gupta to cover while addressing to us. If on RTI application, it is found that the information, which is not flagged information, is received by the AO after 1st April 2021, whether the extension of limitation under all provisions can still be available. A revenue audit had no authority to interpret the law, but under the new provisions, the final audit objection accepted by the department will constitute information for reopening of the case. How far the provisions is legally valid? Whether old and new provisions will simultaneously continue during the interim period. Take, for example, a search and survey was conducted on 1st April when some information of undisclosed income beyond 3 years was found. Whether along with 153A for 3 years, notice under section 148 can also be issued before 30th June for early years. I may mention one thing. Bombay High Court has given a judgment on 3rd of June, and you are aware, Dr. Gupta, in the case of Aramda, that whether the issue was whether the notice issued under the old provisions after 31st March, whether the provisions of the new act will be followed. They have stayed the proceedings, and the department has asked for time to submit the reply. Next question is, if income of 50 lakhs or more which has escaped assessment and represented by any asset is found, the assessment for that year shall be reopened beyond 3 years till 10 years, whether both the income as well as the assets should be undisclosed. Conducting inquiry under section 148A is at the discretion of the AO with the use of the word if required. However, if the AO without conducting any inquiry passes an order under section 148D, whether the specified authority can direct the AO to conduct inquiry and then pass the order. The approval of the specified authority is required both under section 148AA and 148D. Whether the principles laid down by various courts, including Sugamal Rajpal in Supreme Court, will still apply to such approval, that is the application of mind by the specified authority before granting approval. Other questions may come from the floor afterwards. With these words, I once request Dr. Gupta to address us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, respected Shri Surana Sahab, very respected Shri Saraogi Sahab, Shri Khaitan Sahab, and a galaxy of friends from a very renowned Bharat Chamber of Commerce. I have been told about its glorious past. It was set up about 121 years back, and more than the twice of my age. And I am blessed and honored to be part of this very esteemed and honored organization. The topics which I have to speak are relating to the income tax. I have been told that the honored audience of today's deliberations comprise industrialists, the businessmen, apart from a large number of chartered accountants and lawyers. So I would try to see as to whether I can dispense with from being technical in the matters. So as Khaitan Sahab has also laid down the groundwork by saying that every year he receives reassessment notices. Yes, this is the problem which is associated with the wealth. And anyway, so let us understand first of all as to why this reassessment is so vital and important for us. As all of us know, under the Income Tax Act, we file returns. The returns may or may not be selected for scrutiny. And then the assessment, if it is selected in scrutiny, the assessment under section 143.3, technically that is called scrutiny assessment, now is made. And that is taken almost as if it is a finally assessed income. This is for the reason that the legislature attaches great importance to the finality of an assessment. An assessment made under section 143.3, or for that matter any assessment, is accorded a very sanctified status by the law. And therefore, when we talk of reassessment of such finally concluded assessment, then the legislature as the custodian now will have to ensure that there are enough checks and balances which are made so that a finally concluded assessment may not be reopened at mere whim and fancy, on the basis of surmises or conjectures, on the basis of any gossip, rumor or hunch on the part of the assessing officer. And therefore, the reassessment proceedings have always attracted the fancy, not only of the taxpayers, but then of course the tax professionals alike. These provisions of reassessment are not new. They were there under the 1922 Act also, and then they were there, they are there, they have been there under the 1961 Act. But what has been done by the Finance Act 2021, or if I say in a non-technical manner, that this budget of 2021 now has rewritten the entire law relating to the reassessment. though some law which was earlier now has been retained with some modifications, but then there are certain new provisions have been made. And therefore, this interest, I mean, this topic, which was always of interest, even under the old law, now has assumed all the more importance and interest after the new law having been enacted. So the new law says that if there is any income which was chargeable to tax in case of an SSE and which is escaped assessment, then the assessing officer or the income tax department, for that matter, if I say it in non-technical manner, the income tax officer or the assessing officer then can bring to tax such escaped income, and after observing certain other provisions of law. So there has to be income. That income must be chargeable to tax. It is not only mere income simpliciter, but then that income must be chargeable to tax. And then such income which was chargeable to tax has not suffered the tax in the year in which it ought to have suffered the tax. So all these three ingredients, and these ingredients were there under the earlier law also, and these have been retained by the legislature under the new provisions of law. So then what is change? Now one question which respected Shri Surana Sahab has put to me, and this is on this aspect, that under the earlier law, the legislature had used the expression that if the assessing officer had reason to believe that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, now the phrase reason to believe now has been consigned into the dustbin of history under the new law. And a new phrase has been coined, and which appears to be a much lighter test insofar as the revenue is concerned. That instead of reason to believe, now the new provisions say that if an assessing officer has information that suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, then he can bring to tax such escaped income to tax. Therefore, the phrase reason to believe, which was there under the old provision, now has given way to the new expressions, the information that suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. And it has got some meaning. It has sought to achieve certain objectives, at least from the standpoint of the income tax department. And if you ask me in one sentence whether this replacement of the phrase reason to believe by the new phrase information suggesting escapement of income, whether it is good or for bad, then I would say, and my reaction would be mixed. In certain respects, it may be called good. In other respects, it may not be called good. I will come to that aspect a little later when I will deal that question which Honorable Shri S.M. Surana sir has put to me. So this is the plain law, this is the main law, but then there is one explanation which has been added to say that if there is income in respect of an issue, now which has escaped assessment and which comes to the notice of the income tax officer during the course of these proceedings, when he was seized to bring to tax any other escaped income to tax, then he can bring to tax that income in respect of that issue. So in a way, the main provision section 147 is sought to be explained with the help of explanation to say that the jurisdiction of an assessing officer to tax the escaped income will not be confined only in respect of that item of income in respect of which the assessing officer has information that suggests escapement of income for this item. But then his jurisdiction or his duty is to tax any income in respect of any issue, now which may not be in connection with that information which suggested escapement of income, but then which comes to the notice of the assessing officer during the course of these assessment or reassessment proceedings, and then the law obliges that assessing officer to even tax that income in respect of that issue. Now, section or these provisions, I will try to use the sections in the most minimal manner, having regard to the nature of the audience, as I have been told. So, as I said, that instead of reason to believe, under the new law, there has to be information that suggests escapement of income. So, this phrase, that when can it be said that there was information that suggests that income chargeable to tax as escaped assessment, now has been codified or has been given in an exhaustive manner by the legislature, which was not there under the erstwhile phrase of reason to believe. Though reason to believe was given meaning by the courts based upon the established principles of law, but under the new law, the legislature has sought to lay down in somewhat an exhaustive manner as to the circumstances when it can be said that income chargeable to tax as escaped assessment. So two situations have been envisaged. The first situation is that if there was any information with the assessing officer which was flagged by the Central Board of Direct Taxes. So it appears that there will be flagging of certain informations in respect of various assessees. That flagging may be based upon some risk management strategy which may be evolved based upon various inputs, reports, informations received by the CBDT from various sources. Or there may be some user of even artificial intelligence also, I have been told. But then, since nothing is in public domain in respect of this flagging of informations or the risk management strategy to be evolved by the board, and therefore, I mean, with certainty, nothing can be said. But then it appears to me and to most of you also very strongly that there may be several parameters, and some of the parameters which comes to my mind, which may find place in this risk management strategy, may be that if there are deposits of beyond a particular threshold in a person's bank account in a year, then that may be flagged. Or if there are cash withdrawals from the bank account of a person in any year beyond a particular threshold, even that can be if flagged informations. Then buying of properties or selling of properties of a particular amount, and those informations pouring in, coming in from the office of the registration authorities to the income tax department. Now, even those informations can be flagged based upon the perception of the board in the matter of evolving and devising the risk management strategy. So on and so forth. There may be several parameters, and these parameters at least will be based on some cogent basis material. Those basis or material may not be final and conclusive, but then this attempt on the part of the legislature to codify this information as one of the criteria for reopening and disturbing the finality of an assessment appears to be based on some objective criteria, which earlier in the case of reason to believe was not so explicit, though the courts had given meaning to that phrase, that in order to say that when an assessing officer can be said to have reason to believe, he must be in his possession material. That material must be having nexus with the belief of escapement of income. That nexus must be a live nexus with the belief of escapement of income. So these were the principles which were evolved by the courts, including the highest court of the land. And based upon these parameters, that assessing officer was required to have recorded the reason, and that reason would have been the subject matter of judicial scrutiny by the appellate authorities or by the writ court. Now the SSC can say, or for that matter, the departmental authorities can say, that we have got the board made risk management strategy, and in that strategy there are certain information which have been flagged qua this SSE for this very year, and on that basis, now if a case which may have attained finality in terms of assessment now is sought to be reopened on this basis and premise that here is the income on which the tax ought to have been levied now has escaped assessment, then why should you feel aggrieved against the availability of this information? So that can be an argument in favor of the existence of this changed criteria as against the earlier reason to believe, because at that stage there used to be very intense amount of litigations because nothing was codified, everything was based on the judge-made law, and then the assessing officer was required to have recorded that. And I had seen, and so must have you also, that even if there was material in the past with the assessing officers now having live nexus with the belief of escapement of income, but then if a non-indulgent sir, if you can kindly, because there is very urgent telephone, and if you can kindly I'll have.
Yes, sir, please take it. Please take it.
Yes. So this is the first codified criteria under the new law based upon which a case can be reopened or case can be reassessed or an income which has escaped assessment can be brought to tax. The second criteria under the new scheme of the things is that we have got Comptroller and Auditor General, the auditor of the auditors. Now, if he makes out a final objection that the assessment of a person for this year has not been made in accordance with law, then his final objection now can constitute information which suggests that income chargeable to tax is escaped assessment. So in the first instance, we saw that there was information that suggested escapement of income based upon the information flagged, which in turn was to be based on the risk management strategy. Now in second instance is the final objection of the CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General, not only in respect to the escapement of income, though that may also be the reason with him while he makes final objection, but then his area to raise objection is very wide, all encompassing, all embracing, that if the assessment of this person for this year has not been made in accordance with law, and all of us know that an assessment can be said to have not been made in accordance with law because and on several counts. It may be based upon this that the income has escaped assessment, or there may be some other ground unconnected with the income. So the scope of reopening of the assessment under the new law is somewhat sought to be widened by making this criteria of the final objection of the CAG that the assessment of this SSE for this assessment year has not been made in accordance with the law. So this aspect has to be taken care of. Income may not have escaped assessment, but if there has been the under assessment of the tax, income may not have been under assessed, but there may be some other reason because of which it can be said that the assessment has not been made in accordance with the provisions of this act. Now somebody can say that when the main section says that there has to be income which should be chargeable to tax and which must escape assessment, therefore how can it be said that the CAG, by bringing his objection on this point that the assessment has not been made in accordance with law, dehors the income, now can be brought within the reassessment provision? Now, I mean, these are the arguments, because after all, we all are belonging to that intellectual elitist class. Therefore, the questions come in our mind. We cannot resist. So, the reply to which will be that when the meaning of the information suggesting escapement of income now has been artificially defined, and within that artificial definition, if this case has been encompassed, then that means that the meaning of the phrase income chargeable to tax as escaped assessment has been expanded by the legislature under its sovereign power. So unless there is some constitutional infirmity which is found in such expansion, I mean, till that time, I mean, there is no infirmity in law. So instead of erstwhile reason to believe, now these are the two codified situations on the basis of which it can be said that there is information which suggests that income chargeable to tax is escaped assessment. Then there is one more very important amendment which has been made and which was not there earlier. Though I can say that it was there earlier also, but then at that time it was not codified in law. That was the law which was developed by the court, because at times the lordships of the High Court and Supreme Court, I mean, instead of interpreting the law, I mean, they make the law, though it is not expected them to make the law because the courts are there to interpret law. But then while interpreting some law in a very wider manner, I mean, their lordships end up in making law. So earlier, though it was not codified law, but then it was a judge-made law. Now under the new provisions of law, that judge-made law is somewhat attempted to be legislated. Earlier, the judge-made law used to be that whenever you happen to receive a notice for reassessment, you file your return, you ask for the copy of the reason based upon which your case is sought to be reopened, you file objections to him, and then let assessing officer dispose the objections. Now this was the procedure which was not suggested, but then which was laid down by the court and Supreme Court in the case of GK and Drive Shaft. And even it was not codified, but then this was coming from the highest court of the land, now which acquires the force of the law of the land, and therefore now that law was being unscrupulously followed. Now under the new law, now what is proposed, or not what is proposed, rather what has been enacted? What has been enacted is that the assessing officer is duty bound to make inquiry. Now one question, very good questions have been shot by our very revered and respected Shri S.M. Khurana Sahab to me. And one question was relating to this on the phrase if required. So the question was now whether to conduct inquiry under section 148 capital A under the new law, if at all, is dependent upon the discretion of the assessing officer, or there is a statutory edict and mandate for the assessing officer to invariably conduct inquiry. So I'll come to that aspect, but then let us understand as to what is the new provision. The new provision is that the assessing officer shall conduct any inquiry, but of course after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority. Now even if he wants to conduct inquiry on his own, then the law forbids, prohibits, and denies and denudes him. It doesn't give him that kind of a power. So assessing officer shall conduct an inquiry, of course after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority, and that inquiry will be with respect to the information that suggests that the income chargeable to tax is escaped assessment. Now he has got information based upon the risk management strategy made by the board. Now he is expected under the law to conduct inquiry with respect to that information, and therefore this power is there now. So he is required to conduct inquiry. Then thereafter he is obliged under the law to afford an opportunity of hearing to the assessee, but then of course after obtaining the approval from the specified authority. So one question, very good question, which has been asked again by Sri S.M. Khurana sir, was as to what is the nature of this approval. Now whether the earlier judicial decisions that it has to be with the application of mind, or approval can be even bereft of application of mind, even that one of the issues which he has coined and conveys it for my humble reply, which I will give. So he has to conduct inquiry after obtaining approval from the specified authority. He has to give opportunity to the SSE after obtaining the approval from the specified authority, and in that opportunity will be with respect to the inquiry which he has made, or even deholds the inquiry based upon the information in his possession. Then he would say that I am giving you a notice in which a time limit at least of 7 days will have to be given, and law says that the time can be given up to 30 days. But then if an SSE says I need more time, then further time can also be given by the assessing officer. So this much opportunity hearing will have to be given by the assessing officer, and if he has collected some evidence based upon his inquiry, even that evidence is required to be given to the SSE before his response is elicited. Of course, I mean, this is very good, because earlier the cases used to be reopened at the back. Now SSE used to come to know when he used to be given the copy of the reason recorded, but now along, I mean, before the case is reopened, now he will be put on notice. He will be put on alert that here is the information, here is the evidence based upon my inquiry which I had done. Now what you want to say, I elicit your reply. And then thereafter, he is bound to consider the reply, if at all it has been given by the SSE. So if an SSE has not given the reply despite he being put on notice, then obviously, I mean, an impossibility cannot be performed by the assessing officer. So after taking into account the reply, if any, given by the SSE, then this assessing officer now is obliged under the law, but again, after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority, to pass an order. And there is a time limit for passing an order. I am not going on that aspect in order to obviate the necessary burdening with technicalities. So he is required to pass an order, and then that order, of course, will be passed with the prior approval of the specified authority. And this order, which we call an order, though I never wanted to use the section, but then that will be easier for me to make reference in future. That order is order under section 148A, clause small d. That order we will call it. So 148A(d) order. Now that will be served upon the SSE along with the notice of reopening of the assessment. So this order will be one, and the notice, and that notice is called notice under section 148. Now that both will be served upon the SSE, asking him to file his return of income, within the time which may be prescribed in that notice. And this notice under section 148 now will also be issued after obtaining the approval of the specified authority. So the new law is full of prior approvals, and that too from the specified authority. And the specified authorities are the authorities of a very sufficiently higher rank officials. So the new law, the legislature has sought to ensure that the possibility of arbitrary exercise of this power to reopen the concluded assessment may be minimized to the extent possible. Because if an assessing officer alone is the competent authority to have issued the notice, there could be some amount of bias which could be imputed or attributed. Though public officers in law are supposed to be very fair, objective, conscientious, judicious, reasonable, objective. But then Surana Sahab, our seniors, and we all know, I mean, how long and how far they are having these kind of scarce attributes. I mean, it's anybody's guess. So, but then when the legislature contemplates that these actions by the assessing officer will be taken, can be taken, or should be taken, are bound to be taken based upon the prior approval of those specified authorities, then of course at least there is a strong possibility of an objective appreciation. At least the law believes. Whether in practice that will happen or not, I mean, I need not to comment before my seniors, but then at least the law believes so, and let us believe the law I mean, we don't have any other option not to believe, I mean, the framers of law. Anyway, so, but then kindly see, there are spate, there are number of approvals, and to what extent the departmental authority will not be drowned under the weight of these successive approvals now is something which is in the womb of time, and we'll have to keep our fingers crossed to see as to what happens. I have got my strong. The other day I was speaking in Calcutta in the August company of Sri Surana sir and Sri S.S. Gupta sir. I said that under the old law, the departmental authorities were not able to handle one approval under section 151. Now here the assessing officer has been bulldozed, bombarded with spate of approvals. I mean, to what extent such bulldozed, bombarded, the poor, the helpless assessing officer, I mean, would cope up with this kind of bombardment now is something which is in the womb of time. And let us see. So this, and once that notice is served under section 148 asking him to file the return, but then I always wondered, and my seniors are here, so if they can also assist me in that. Now, what is the purpose of asking an SSE? I mean, this question has always bothered me. As Surana sir spoke about my Hindi poetry, yes, nowadays I had been writing the series of poetries, two have gone. Prashna khoja uttar. So there are certain questions in our epics, I mean, which elude answers. So even this question has eluded answer to me. I mean, right from my professional infancy, as to what is the purpose, rational justification for asking an SSE to refile or to file his return in response to notice under section 148 when there is no concession, additional advantage or benefit contemplated under the scheme in case if somebody wants to declare, I mean, that income which has escaped assessment. Now, whether there is anything, I mean, by which you can benefit a taxpayer who is bearing his chest and coming forward to declare it, and to my mind, there is none, except that it can be a case of an admitted concealment. But then that is beside the point. But then I just wanted to raise this question. This is like one of those questions which I find in epics, that the questions which elude answer, and this also eludes answer insofar as I am concerned. But anyway, so then the SSE, I mean, is expected to file return, and that return once filed, now the law says that it will also be treated as a return under section 139, meaning thereby as if this was the return which he has always filed. Now this inquiry, 148A inquiry, then opportunity to the SSE, eliciting and soliciting the response of the SSE, and then passing the order, preliminary order, the interlocutory order by the assessing officer, that order is 148D, now will not be undergone in case of a person who has either been searched or in whose case the requisition now has been made under section 132 capital A, or in case of a person whose money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing belonging to him have been found at somebody else's search, or with respect to whom the books of accounts or the documents pertaining to him have been found, or some information relating to him which is contained in these books of accounts have been found. Now, for these category of persons, now the benefit of inquiry will not be there, the benefit of opportunity at that preliminary stage will not be given, the benefit of the assessing officer passing a preliminary order that will not be accorded. I do not know, I mean, why this kind of the untouchable treatment has been given to the person searched. But then anyway, the legislature in its wisdom has made such kind of a provision which is not applicable in case of searched person, so let it be. But then there is one very important fiction. Our income tax though the topic today, which has been given to me by my senior Shri Surana sir, is only on this aspect. Otherwise, anytime in future, if you think calling me to speak on the deeming fictions under the Income Tax Act, our Income Tax Act is full of deeming. Even if it is a day, even if the sun, is there at our head, but then the legislature can say and have said that, oh, it's not day, it's night. And then we all helpless and poor taxpayers will have to concede, yes, it is night. So our Income Tax Act is full of such kind of fictions, fictions after fictions, full of fictions. And one fiction now has been made under the new law also, because no law, howsoever new that law may be, can be complete unless there are fictions. So even this law is riddled with fiction, and the fiction is that in case you are a person searched, or you are a person whose books of accounts, money, etc. have been requisitioned, or if you are a person who has been surveyed, if you are a person whose money, etc., books, etc., have been found at some other's place, then in respect of you, 4 categories of persons, now it will be deemed. You see the height of deeming. Now it will be deemed for preceding 3 years that there was information, that information suggested, and that suggestion was that there was an income, and that income was chargeable to tax, and such chargeable income has escaped assessment. Now you kindly see the fiction that in respect of these persons, now preceding 3 years assessments, or preceding 3 years, it will be deemed. And once it will be deemed, or where it is there that there is information which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, obviously that means that there will mandatorily be 3 years assessment. And even with respect to this aspect also, our senior Shri Surana sir has asked very good question. Now I'll take those questions at the end of my this deliberations, but then I would say that I have he has made me wiser, and of course, our seniors are there, and we are bound to be wiser, and I really owe, because I see it from a different point of view also. Because if anything good which I find, then I keep them separately so that I'll incorporate them in my next edition of the book for the larger benefit of our readers. So in respect of search, in respect of survey, in respect of that third person, to whom, if you permit me to call him a 153C kind of a person, now benefit or fiction, the deeming fiction is for the preceding 3 years that there is information that suggested income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. Then there is that for how many years the case can be reopened under the new law. Under the old law, if you remember, there were 3 time limits: 4 years, 6 years, and 16 years. Now this has been so projected by the finance minister while presenting the finance bill at the floor of the parliament. So we have reduced it, or we have made it for 10 years. In fact, 6 to 16 years time limit was applicable in case of the foreign assets. Now those foreign assets now are bound to be taken care of by an equally draconian law that is called the Black Money, Undisclosed Foreign Income and Assets and Imposition of Tax Act 2015. Therefore, to do away with that 6 to 16 years from the Income Tax Act, now it was a well thought out and a conscious decision. But then let us take it that 4 years and 6 years time were there. Now it is 3 and 10 years. So in a way, we probably wanted to go in for being Chabbeji, but then in that process we have become Dubbeji, because instead of 6 years, now the case can be reopened for 10 years. But of course, 3 years and 10 years, these are the 2 time limits now which are there under the new law. For 3 years, any amount of income that escapes assessment, that can be reopened, or in case of a survey, or in case of a search, or in case of that other person. Now these 3 years assessments will be done mandatorily. because there is a deeming fiction that there was an information suggesting escapement of income. But in respect of other cases, 3 years cases can be reopened only if there is one of those two criteria which are there: flagged information or the CAG's final objection. But then beyond 3 years till 10 years, the case can be reopened if the assessing officer, on the basis of the books of accounts or the documents or the material in his possession, now is of the belief that the income escaped assessment or the income which is likely to escape assessment is rupees 50 lakhs or more, number one, and such escaped income is represented by asset. Now again, at this point, very good question has been coined by Surana sir, and that question is now whether income alone has to be undisclosed or even that asset has also to be undisclosed. Only then the jurisdiction to reopen a case beyond 3 years till a period of 10 years can be assumed. So I do not know, I mean, who has advised them to make such kind of a provision that beyond 3 years you can reopen the case if there is escaped income or the likely escaped income is 50 lakhs or more. And to this extent I understand. But then the other rider which has been made, or the self-imposed obstacle, legislature self-imposed obstacle, I mean, but then I would say for them that probably it has not been thought out clearly by the legislature before creating this self-imposed obligation to say that this escaped income is represented by assets. So if there is escaped income maybe of 10 crores of rupees, but then if it is not represented by assets, then such escaped income cannot be brought to tax. That case cannot be reopened beyond 3, and if that year is a year beyond 3 years. So this is the limitation which the legislature, and then of course the asset has been defined, though in an inclusive manner, to mean immovable property, the shares and securities, immovable property, land, building or both, shares and securities, deposits in bank, loans and advances. I do not know why the cash has not been there cannot be, I mean, the biggest asset, at least the liquid asset, then the cash, but then the cash is missing. Again, this is probably a question which eludes answer. प्रश्न खोजें उत्तर, प्रश्न खोजें उत्तर, मैं विमूढ़ निस्तब्ध निरुत्तर. So मैं बचपन से सुरान साहब सोचा करता था कि बहुत बचपन में कहानियां पढ़ी थी कि एकलव्य को वैसे तो शिष्य नहीं बनाया, और जब नहीं बनाया और वो धनुर्धर हो गया तो गुरु दक्षिणा के रूप में उसे अंगूठा मांगा. ये चीजें प्रश्न खोजें उत्तर. एंड आई टेल यू, आई डू नॉट नो, आई मीन विच goddess, probably Saraswati, I must be there, which made me awake during the mid of the night and asked me to write, and I wrote. And some comments which I received, though I am nowhere near to those comments, but then if somebody says, I mean, this is like Rashmi Rathi of Dinkar,
Very good.
And I mean, I don't have any words. And the people say, Rakesh ji, you have changed your profession. I say there is no conflict between the two. Here also I try to compose a poem in text. Anyway, so 151 now is a section which says that who will be that specified authority. Now who will watch on the action or assessing officer, who will give approval wherever that approval is contemplated for reopening. Now this has been given under section 151, that if 3 years or less than 3 years period is involved, then the principal commissioner or the principal director, or the commissioner or the director are the competent authority or the specified authority. But then if the case is for a year beyond 3 years up to 10 years, then principal director general, principal chief commissioner. And you can very well appreciate the seriousness with which the legislature has sought to enact this kind of a provision by bringing enfold such officers of such higher rank, and there is a presumption, unwritten presumption in law, that more you go high in hierarchy, then the more objective, fair, conscientious, judicious, objective, reasonable you will be. So that way the legislature has sought to limit the possibility of arbitrariness by codifying those two instances of information, by making these officers of the sufficient higher rank as the approving authority. So this is the new scheme, though there can be various issues, but since the issues have been conversed and coined by Surana sir, so I think before I go to the other topic of the charitable trusts, or if I complete that and then I will come to the questions, Surana sir.
I think you first complete these questions and thereafter we will come to charitable trust.
Okay, sir. So have you circulated these questions to your participants also?
No, sir. No, sir.
Oh, okay. So I'll read and then.
Yes.
So the first question, and all questions, as I said during the interregnum of my deliberations, of class themselves, whether there was more safeguard to the SSE with the words reason to believe in earlier provisions, or there is more safeguard by way of introduction of section 148A. So as I said that I cannot give answer in one line whether the earlier regime was good or the new regime is good. Earlier regime was good in the sense that I mean from the standpoint of the SSEs, that reason to believe was not codified, and therefore in every case whenever the reason of belief of escapement used to be recorded as assessing officer, we used to challenge before the appropriate court that there was no material based upon which you could have formed the belief of escapement of income. If at all there was a material, but then the material cannot be said to be having live nexus with the belief of escapement of income. It was a case of change of opinion on the same set of facts. It is not case of a belief of escapement of income, but then it is an attempt, an alibi to review the assessment, so on so forth. And the departmental authorities also at times used to find it difficult to match these arguments, and therefore now the legislature has sought to codify two situations, and if situation is covered under any one of them or under both of them, then it will be a case of income suggesting escapement of income, and then the SSE can be sure that yes, if his case falls under this clause, then of course his case can be reopened. The income tax officer also finds that this is the objective criteria, then he can say that income which has escaped assessment. So reason to believe was giving rise to lots of litigations. Our jurisprudence is full of litigations on the interpretation of the word reason to believe, but then that shows that the legislature wanted to attach the utmost sanctity to the finality of an assessment, because this reason to believe phrase is there under the power to search also. So you can very well imagine that the legislature is so serious because it equates the power to reopen a concluded assessment with power to issue warrant of search by using an identical expression reason to believe in both the sections. So that shows that the legislature wanted to treat them at par in the matter of the jurisdictional conditions. But then be that as it may, according to me, no clear-cut answers can be given. The second question is a very good question, which is that if on RTI application it is found that information which is not a flagged information is received by the assessing officer after 1st April 2021, whether the extension of limitation under the old provisions can still be available. And probably the meaning of this question, which I have understood, is that under the old law, if there was some information which has come to the file of the assessing officer on or after 1st April 2021 in respect of say assessment year 2013-14 or 2014-15. Now whether on the basis of such belated receipt of information, the notice under section 148 under the old regime based upon the strength of the notification can be issued. Probably this is the question, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This is the question. Huh? Sir, if we see the taxation and other laws relaxations of the provisions act 2020, it's section 3 subsection 1. Now it gives the government or the tax authorities to or extended period for completion of certain actions. Now completion of action in the matter of issue of notice under section 148 is one such thing. Now completion of action or completion of the action of issuance of a notice under section 148 now includes all those actions which precede that ultimate culmination of that issuance of notice. Therefore, in my humble view, because 148 notice cannot be issued unless the assessing officer records the reason under the old law. So, therefore, the completion of action in the matter of issuance of notice under section 148, the time limit for which is up to 30th June. Now, all actions preceding to this, now, according to me, 1st April or no 1st April, there is no bar in my respectful subject. Third, revenue audit has the authority to interpret law, but under new provisions, the final audit objection accepted by the department will constitute information for reopening of the case.
Sir, I mean, revenue authority had no authority to interpret the law. Maybe no is not right.
No authority.
Yes, they had no authority to interpret the law under the old law.
No. I mean, maybe I may not be well informed on that point. Now, whether they have got authority to interpret the law or not, I cannot foresee that any audit party now can be deprived of this right, that this is the position of law and I am bringing to your notice, because after all, the function of an auditor is to bring his observations, whether on facts or in law, now to the notice of some other authority. Therefore, to say his interpretation of law may not ultimately be held valid by the competent court, that is a different matter. But then if an audit party now says that this is the position of law, then obviously that party would say based upon something. They will not say it just in the air. They will not say it just in the vacuum. They will say which must be based on some plausible material, and then CAG, which is the final objection, because when there are interim objections, the department also contests it tooth and nail. And thereafter, if the CAG through a particular process then reaches to a conclusion that this is the final objection, and based upon that final objection, maybe in respect of a particular position of law, now that position of law is being intimated by the CAG, and based upon which CAG is saying that assessment in this case has not been made in accordance with the law, now the case can be reopened. Now, after reopening, now if you as an SSE now want to say that this understanding that this case has not been done in accordance with law is incorrect based upon these arguments, then the appellate authority would see, or the writ court would see. But then to say that audit party or the comptroller or auditor general cannot bring to the notice about the position of law to the assessing officer, that probably may have held the field under the old law. Now the legislature has codified two situations, and one situation is the final objection. Final objection may be in the realm of fact or in the realm of law, and reopening is being done. Final verdict is not. Final verdict is with the assessing officer, and of course his action is also subject to judicial review. So to my mind, that most respect and humility, I would say that so far as legally valid, there is a provision under explanation 2 to section 148. Next question, whether old and new provisions will simultaneously continue during the interim period. Interim period 1st of April to 30th June. Take for example, a search or survey was conducted after 1st April, wherein some information of undisclosed income beyond 3 years was found. Whether along with section 153A for 3 years notice under 148 can be issued before 30. No, sir. Sir, 153A is clearly ruled out. The moment there is a search on or after 1st April 2021, section 153 itself says, second proviso to section 149 also says that if search has taken place on or after 1st April 2021, then 153A would not come in operation. So in this case, in question number 4, since search has taken place after 1st April, therefore the new provisions alone will apply, 3 and 10 years. Now in case of survey also will be dealt accordingly. Next question, if income of 50 lakhs or more which has escaped assessment and represented by any asset is found, the assessment for that year shall be reopened beyond 3 years till 10 years. Whether both the income as well as the assets should be undisclosed. So far as income is concerned, of course it has to be undisclosed, or put it in the legal language instead of undisclosed, because the legislature has not used the expression undisclosed here. The legislature escaped income. So if this 50 lakhs or more is the escaped income, then obviously it has to be escaped and it should be represented by asset. Now I have not been able to fathom, appreciate, understand, contemplate, visualize, and why say any such asset now which has been acquired out of undisclosed or escaped income now can still be called disclosed or declared or explained income. So that income now which has been made out or acquired or invested by escaped income obviously would be an escaped asset. There cannot be this situation that the income is escaped but the asset is disclosed, or income is disclosed or asset is undisclosed. I mean, both go hand in hand.
Sir, what I meant was,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
suppose some loan is taken.
Yes, sir.
1 crore loan, and loan is bogus loan.
Yes.
In books of the SSC.
Yes, sir.
Now the loan of 1 crore is bogus and it was invested in property and that is there in the property. Balance sheet is there in the property. Now the department says 1 crore loan is bogus and it is represented by the property, which is there in the balance sheet.
So, sir, when the department's charge is that income of more than 50 lakhs is bogus, and that bogus is being represented by this asset. So when that now once that SSE would pay tax on that income, then even that asset also now, I mean, would change its color. Huh?
So that is my question.
Okay. So next question, conducting inquiry under section 148A is at the discretion of the AO, because the use of the word if required. So first of all, let me deal up to this stage. So sir, let us be very clear. Now there is no discretion, and the word if required is and does not indicate the discretion. If required takes into account that situation where that inquiry, like in case of such inquiry, is not to be made. So in cases other than search, in case of those other kind of persons of 153C where the inquiry has not to be made under 148A, therefore if required means that all other cases. So otherwise the inquiry contemplated under 148 capital A is mandatory. It is not based on discretion, and this required, if required, it has been used in that context. However, if the AO without conducting an inquiry passes an order under 148 AD, whether the specified authority can direct the AO to conduct inquiry and then pass an order. No, once he passes an order 148 AD, and that too after obtaining the prior approval of the specified authority, because section itself says Now, once that order has been passed, then where is the occasion for the specified authority? Because then that specified authority will become functus officio. So in that situation, I mean that without conducting inquiry, passing 148D order will nail in the coffin of that reassessment. The approval of the specified, next question, the approval of the specified authority is required both under section 148A and 148D. Whether the principle laid down in the case of Chuggamal Rajpal will still apply to such approval, that is application of mind by the specified authority before granting approval. Very good question. Now, if you read the old section 151, it was differently worded. And that was worded that if these authorities were satisfied on the reasons recorded by the assessing officer that it is a fit case for issue of notice under section 148. So the legislature had used the expressions that where these authorities were satisfied. The satisfaction may be a subjective satisfaction, but then satisfaction had to be based on objective consideration. And therefore, whenever we used to challenge that 151 satisfaction was not the satisfaction as contemplated under the then prevailing law, then we used to say that this satisfaction arrived at by the principal commissioner is not based on objective considerations, and which is evident from the plain reading of the satisfaction recorded by him when he says, yes, I am satisfied, or where he merely puts his signature. So Chuggamal Rajpal and all those decisions were given in that context. Now the legislature in a very intelligent fashion has changed the user of the expressions. Instead of satisfaction, now they have said prior approval of the specified authority, and therefore the question comes now whether the change of the expression under the erstwhile 151 and now in 148A, whether is going to make any difference. In fact, this approval is there under section 274 subsection 2 also. When the penalty order is passed imposing penalty beyond a particular threshold, then also it cannot be passed without the prior approval joint this thing. Then there if under section 153D also, if you remember, the same expressions have been used, approval. Now in the context of section 274 and 153D also, and on the basis of the principle of natural justice, the courts have interpreted that even the approval may have the overtones of an administrative approval, but then this approval is given by public officer, number one. Number two, now has been given in order to disturb the finality of an assessment, and therefore the minimum which is expected of an approving authority is to write at least 2 lines in support of he granting and according his approval, so that the higher appellate or writ court now should be in a position to appreciate the mental process before the approval is accorded. Because I always say, and that is the dictum of law also, that conclusion of any public officer is the most important, but equally important, if not more, is the mental process of reaching to that conclusion. Any conclusion bereft of the reason is like throwing water in the sand. Therefore, even if the legislature has cleverly, cunningly, smartly changed the phraseology in section 148A, instead of satisfaction, have used expressions approval, but according to me, I mean those parameters, ingredients, elements of satisfaction, they are nonetheless present in the word approval also. Next question. In section 153C, for the third person, originally the word belongs to were used, yes, which were replaced by the words pertain to. and now replaced by the words relates to. Sir, it is not replacement by relate to now. This was replaced under 153C also. Earlier, the use was if money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article of thing, books of accounts or documents belong to SSE. Now, the Delhi High Court, my Lord Justice Badr Durej Ahmed, in case of Pepsi. Now, my Lord, Delhi High Court held in that decision that these documents cannot be said to be belonging to an SSE. They may be pertaining to the SSE. Then the legislature became wiser, and that is how the law keeps on evolving. So the legislature made an amendment in 2015 in section 153C to say money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing must belong. Books of accounts or documents must pertain, and information in those books of accounts document must relate. So as not to leave any scope whatsoever. Now, incidentally, now legislature either does not work. When it works, then it overworks. And there is always, I say, the knee-jerk reaction. It happens. आपके यहाँ हमारे बड़े अच्छे दोस्त सुधाकर रेड्डी साहब हैं, वो one day he was telling me कि राकेश, this government is like, or any government for that matter, is like a bulldozer. Now you dance before the bulldozer. He will not do anything. He will not say anything. You keep on dancing. That will keep on moving. But once you are caught, then there is no escape. There is no rescue. So the government either would not make any change. If would make a change, that change will be such drastic change. Then at times I feel like laughing. I remember in Hiralal Sibbal's case, which is reported 101 ITR. Now the question was whether the authorized officer would have taken search of the person who was inside the house, and he himself was the person searched himself was the district and session judge who was posted in Shimla in undivided Punjab. So when the matter was contested in High Court and it was said that there was no warrant of search for the person who was inside the house, then the act was amended. And now you see the act was amended in which manner? That the authorized officer can search a person who is getting into the house, who is coming out of the house, who is inside the house. If you read section 132, subsection 1, I mean those powers. So the legislature, fortunately, unfortunately, they have not said that person who is paratrooping from above or who is coming out from the earth. I mean that kind of, those two dimensions have been left. You never know, I mean even that kind of an amendment would come. So what I'm saying is that belonging to, pertaining and relating to, I mean, were there under 153C from 2015. And next, in case of search, the provision 148A shall not apply, but in case of survey, 148A shall apply. This is a very good question. Therefore, is it necessary for the AO to bring material on record with regard to any income which has escaped assessment, for which action under 148 is required to be taken, since the AO has to pass an order under section 148? This is a very good question. In fact, when I and my partner, Dr. Raj, wrote the next edition of our book, which is coming in this week from Taxman in Search and Seizure, now we visualize this position. Is that on the one hand, 148 explanation says that in case of a search or survey, 3 years cases will be presumed, 3 years cases will be deemed where there is information suggesting escapement of income. Now, in case of survey, he has to make inquiry and he has to pass an order. So what order would he pass? When the case is to be reopened, irrespective whether anything is found or not, whether there is any evidence of escapement of income or not, when the case is to be reopened for 3 years, but in case of a survey, he is required to inquire, give opportunity and pass an order, then what kind of an order would he pass? That kind of a, and probably your question is this only. Now, you see, income suggesting escapement of income. Now, this state of affairs has been assumed that in case of survey, let us confine to survey only, that in case of survey, it will be deemed in respect of preceding 3 years that there is information that suggests that there is income which there is income which has escaped assessment. And let me go further, whether or even if there is no evidence of escapement of income found. But then the very fact that his case has to be brought in within this deeming fiction, then what essential, what is there to establish is that there was a survey. The survey was valid survey. Now, once the factum of survey is there, so that assessing officer now would pass an order as to the existence of this jurisdictional condition that there was a survey. That approving authority would also apply his mind. Yes, whether this condition by virtue of which there is a deeming fiction that there is income suggesting escapement of income now should operate in this case or not. So to this extent, though there appears to be somewhat inconsistency, but according to me, that even this fact that there was a survey, now that is, and that survey is not under subsection 2A, that survey is not under subsection 5. Now all those things will have to be recorded by the assessing officer in his order, and that order will be approved from the specified authority, and that is how. So probably that order can be passed under section 148D. Is it necessary to file a fresh return in response to notice under section 148 under the new provisions, or a letter to treat the earlier return as written in response to notice under section 148 will be sufficient? Now here the response lies in expediency rather than the technicality of law. If you ask me strictly, filing of return is a sine qua non, though that is a different matter, that the courts have also condoned that even if you file this letter, that our earlier return be treated as a return filed in response to notice of 148 is sufficient compliance of the requirement of 148 notice. That is a different matter. But then, because filing of return has got the verification, and any statement or misstatement of that verification has got implications, severe implications in terms of prosecution. Therefore, to write a letter and to file a return, according to me, is, but then if the department doesn't insist, courts also say, Miyan Bibi Raji, kya karega Kaji, then let us do it. Can the AO extend the period of limitation beyond 3 years by issuing show cause notice under section 148A on 31st March, thus getting benefit of the time? If you remember, sir, on the last webinar in which you were there, Shri S.S. Gupta sir was there. Now I said, now what to say of 3 years? He can extend the period of even 10 years. Though section 149 ostensibly says that no notice beyond 10 years can be issued. But then if you read the third proviso of that 149, it says that the time given to you for giving reply to notice issued under section 148 capital A, that will be added. So if 1 month time has been given, then it can be 10 years, 1 month. If 3 months time have been given, then this period can be 10 years, 3 months. So we should not harbor any misconception. We should not remain in any kind of a paradise. I am not using the expressions fool's paradise. We should not remain in any kind of misconception that 10 years is a very dogmatic, static, strict 10 years. Not. The time given to an SSE under section 148 capital A for giving reply, now that will also be loaded, applied, added. So, sir, these
sir, may I intervene?
Yes,
some people are leaving, so I would request you that you can take these questions later on if you can come to the charitable thing.
It's very coincidental, Ketan sir, ki wo ye question hi khatam ho gaya to.
Acha, khatam ho raha, because people have, I find that some people are leaving because we have already covered 1.5 hours. So if you can come to the charitable thing.
Okay.
Only one question which I have. Yes, this codified thing, the third party information will come into effect or not? Suppose I write to the income tax authorities, this person have that kind of an asset or this kind of.
Very good question. Very good question.
So third party.
Probably this tax evasion petitions kind of thing may be flagged because nothing is in public domain. It may be flagged information, and which will come in the risk management strategy, provided some kind of homework is done by the tax department. Otherwise, if based upon TEP, if they start reopening the assessment, I mean, that will give a very wide and unbridled powers to the tax authorities. So this may be a triggering point. There may be some internal internal instructions that in case TEP comes, some minimum amount of inquiry may be made, and after collecting and find some substance, then that can be incorporated as one of the flagged information. So
Okay.
nothing is in public domain, Ketan sir.
Okay.
Yes. Now in case of charitable trust, now 3 or 4 major amendments have been made by this budget 2021. The first new thing which was brought was that corpus donations, if we are receiving, then that corpus donations is required to be kept in a separate bank account. Earlier, there was no concept of keeping your general donations and the corpus donations, I mean, different account. But then by this Finance Act, now it has been made mandatory that for the corpus donations, you can claim the benefit of exemption only when you keep it in a separate account, or you invest or deposit in one or the forms or modes of investment which is there. So only then you will get the benefit of exemption under section corpus donation. The next amendment which was done is that out of this corpus donations, what we used to do, we used to apply it for charitable purpose, because every charitable trust is required to apply 85%. So while computing 85%, whatever amount we used to apply out of the corpus funds also we used to take it into account. Now this budget says that since corpus probably seeks to say, though it has not said in very many words, because corpus is something which is of the fixed capital. Therefore, if you utilize for your objective out of this, you can do so, but then we will not take that utilization for the purpose of calculating 85%. Now we will take only that much of amount out of such utilized amount which you redeposit or which you reinvest in one or more forms or modes of investment out of your income. And that is also a condition which is very onerous, that if you have, suppose in a year one, you have utilized a portion of the corpus donations for your charitable purpose. So first of all, that amount utilized will not be counted for the purpose of determining 85%. Now in subsequent year, out of that year's current income, now if you redeposit or you reinvest in one or more of the forms or modes of investment which is there, which we call investments mode under section 11.5, then to that extent it will be treated as application in that year in which you happen to so apply out of your that year's income. And similarly, when we borrow or the charitable trust or institutions borrow, and out of that borrowed funds, now utilization for charitable purpose was permissible. It is permissible even now. But what now law says, I mean, what has been said equally for the corpus donations utilization, that if you borrow and utilize it for charitable purpose, that you can do, but then we will not count this utilization for the purpose of determining 85%. We will take it into account, this utilization into account only to this extent in that year when you repay out of your that year's income. Only that much portion of the repayment will be taken into account for the purpose of determining 85% of that year. And thereafter, the amendment which is affecting all and sundry in a very big way is about seeking registration. Now, I am always at loss to understand that the kind of provisions which are made, which have been made in case of the charitable trusts, now that shows an immense amount of distrust. And these trusts are made to undergo, I mean, such kind of the paperwork, and that too very comprehensive paperwork, which defies logic and which stands in their way of performing the charitable objects. Now, these charitable trusts and organized institutions now have to retain staff for making the compliances. But then, strange are the ways. Probably there must be some internal input with the government that some charitable trusts, ostensibly charitable trusts, but then may not be performing the charitable activities. So, which comes first? Whether the hen, whether the chick or the egg? I mean, is the question. Whether the distrust comes first, then the people behave in that manner, or people behave in that manner, then the distrust comes. I mean, that is a larger question. But then, be that as it may, the registration requirement. So, those charitable trusts and institutions which have already been registered earlier, now they are required to re-register themselves up to 30th June by making applications. Those applications which were pending as on 1st April 2021, now to them the provisional registrations will be given by the tax department. So there are 3 sets of charitable trusts where on 1st April they were already registered. They will have to apply, seek re-registration. Second category, where applications are pending, then they will be given provisional registrations. And in the third category, there are 4 types of charitable trusts. Those which have been approved under the new regime. So it will come into operations later on. But then let us, for the completeness, for the sake of complete, let us discuss this, that where a trust or institution would be registered under the new provision, and in future when their registration would expire, then they will have to make application at least 6 months prior to the expiry of that registration. The next category of trust is that where institution has been provisionally registered. So some provisional registration has been made, and that trust has commenced its activities, then that trust will have to apply within 6 months from the commencement of the activity. Or in case it has not so commenced its activity, then at least 6 months prior to the expiry of such provisional registration. And there are other 2 categories of the trusts also which have to get themselves registered. But then since they are not of much, then I'm leaving it, because then the next thing, 12AB. Now, in case of applications made by those charitable trusts who were earlier registered and the registration was in force on 1st April, now for them the registration will be granted by the principal commissioner on the receipt of this application within 1 month from the within 3 months from the end of the month in which the application is received. And where application is made for provisional registration, then it will be issued within 1 month from the end of the month in which the application is made. But in respect of other applications of registration, then the principal commissioner now may inquire, may ask for the information or the documents, may see whether the activities of the charitable trusts are genuine or not, and whether the compliance of any other law which is applicable on the charitable trust or institution, and which compliance is material for the achievement of the objects by the trust, now that can be seen by the principal commissioner. And in case principal commissioner finds that the objects are charitable, its activities are genuine, and it has complied with any other requirement of any other law which was applicable to this charitable trust, then he can issue a registration certificate, and that registration certificate will be valid for next 5 years. But then in case he is not so satisfied, then of course, after giving you an opportunity hearing, then he can reject it. Then even later on, if some information is received by the principal commissioner that the activities are not being carried out in accordance with the objects of the trust, or that charitable trust or institution has incurred a disability by making payments to the related parties, or when the compliance of any other provision of any other law is not being done and some indictment has been made under that law on this trust and that order has attained finality, then the principal commissioner, after giving you an opportunity being heard, can cancel the registration. And once that registration is cancelled, then kindly mind there is a very dangerous provision, that is section 115 TD. At the market value as on the date of cancellation of registration as reduced by value of liabilities. Now that will suffer the tax. 30%. So these are the provisions or the new provisions in respect of the charitable trust and institutions introduced by the Finance Act 2021, and major is about the registration. And in case that charitable trust wants to get itself registered for the purpose of section 80G, then also there are more or less these kind of requirements of filing and seeking registrations to the principal commissioner, because now charitable trust and institutions, when will furnish a particular statement to the tax department, based upon that only the donors, can claim the benefit of deductions under section 80G, and there is a particular time limit for filing that statement by such charitable trusts and institutions. And therefore this matter of registration of charitable trust and institution all of a sudden has assumed a lot of importance. Now there used to be a periodical renewal on earlier occasions, but then for quite good number of years the government declared that this registration will be perpetual. Now I do not know what happened. Now what is the input with the government that they have revived the necessity of seeking the registration again. Probably the purpose will be to keep a time bound monitoring of the activities of the charitable trust and institutions. So that may be, but then it has increased, it will increase the cost of compliances on the part of charitable trust and institutions. But then those charitable trusts and institutions who are existing solely for educational purpose, or who are running medical institutions and exist solely for the philanthropic purpose, and their gross receipts in aggregate in a year are not in excess of rupees 5 crores, then they can continue to work without seeking any approval or registration and enjoying the benefit of exemptions in respect of its entire income derived from these two charitable activities. But then they have to be doubly sure that they exist solely for education and they exist solely for philanthropic purpose. So I remember I was arguing one case before my Lord Justice T.S. Thakur, as he then was, as the first Pune judge of the Supreme Court, with Justice Rohington Nariman in the case of some educational institution against the order of Uttarakhand High Court. Now I remember I had a very tough time to give reply to my lord. They say, and what kind of charity are you doing? these schools and the kind of perception everybody has got in respect of schools and hospitals, that what kind of a charity. But then it took a lot of time for me to make them appreciate that the charitable purpose has been given a specific meaning under the Income Tax Act, and therefore one should not confuse with their own perception of charity when it comes to be seen the scope of charity under the Income Tax Act. That is how they were swayed. So charity is such a word that creates confusion, at least in the matter of income. And then kindly see, I remember I had to convey that argument. My lords, to give free education and medical is the job of the state, and therefore in the backdrop of that obligation of the state to provide these facilities free of cost, now this concession was given. Now this concession was not given as a measure of any bounty. That was in return of that state not meeting its obligations because of the paucity of resources. So anyway, that is the larger issue. But then charitable trust and institutions are having tough time to observe these procedural requirements, but then be that as it may, we'll have to do. Now there are 3 questions, four questions which are sent to me, and they are very practical and are very relevant. Can the department issue provisional registration under section 12AB for 5 years where application is made under clause 1? Yes, but then provisional, why provisional? I'm sorry to say the department is using the word provisional in such registration certificates being issued. This is not provisional. This is the firm registration. It's not only firm, this is the confirmed registration. And therefore, the user of such expressions which is not known to the law, is something, which must be abhorred, and it is worth deprecating. So department has to issue confirmed registration for 5 years under section 12AB in case of those charitable trusts whose registration is effective as on 1st April 2021. So second is not applicable. Third is whether the AO has power to make inquiries, AO or PCIT. AO has to power to make inquiries where application is made under clause 1. Sir, it is AO or Principal Commissioner?
Principal Commissioner, sir, sorry. Principal
Okay. So the Principal Commissioner is not bound to make any inquiry, at least at the time of making the first time registration. But later on, if some information reaches to him, of course with some evidence, that the activities of the trust are not being carried out in accordance with objects, then of course under 12AB4 or subsection 5, then he is competent to issue you the notice seeking the cancellation. Next is if no order is passed within the time limits under section 12AB3, and the time limit is 3 months, 6 months, 1 month, will the registration be deemed to have been granted? Now, this was, I remember that I had an occasion to argue before a special bench of the tribunal in Dev Raha Babas. And my Lord Justice Ishwar, as he then was, he was the presiding judge of that special bench. Mr. Jagtav was there, and one more member. So then the theory of legitimate expectation was conveyed by me, I remember, that if I have applied for registration, then I am entitled to expect that that authority will grant or refuse registration within a particular time frame. Now, if that authority does not dispose my application, therefore, I am entitled to expect on the basis of the theory of legitimate expectations, and my expectation is legitimate, that registration must have been granted. And in any case, you have got power to cancel it. So in case later on you find something objectionable, then you invoke that power. And special bench said that this be deemed to have been granted. Then came a couple of decisions from High Court which did not agree with this. And initially, even Allahabad High Court did not agree with this. But then later on, Allahabad High Court, in a subsequent decision, also accepted this line of argument that in case an authority is obliged to act within a particular time frame, does not act, more particularly in the matter of the grant or refusal of registration, then should be deemed to have granted registration. And against that decision, when the department went in before Supreme Court by way of the special leave petition, then the special leave petition was dismissed. I'm not sure whether a special leave petition was dismissed or it was dismissed by converting it into the civil appeal. I'm not aware, but then the decision is reported in 382 ITR at page 6. So the position of law, which as of now is there, though it can be debated and argued, that if an order is not passed within the time as prescribed in the statute, then the registration should be deemed to be granted. So this is what my response and humble reply to the questions which are put to me. So if there are questions from the audience, I think we have 15 minutes, so we can take them up.
Sir, I have one question. May I ask the question?
Yes, Sunil bhai, bataiye.
Sir,
you are the worthy son of Surana, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Sir, this is with regard to one recent judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court regarding extending the period of limitation.
Yes.
So I would like to just read out once. It'll take half a minute to read out the relevant para, which is in page 4, last line.
Yes. What is that?
we therefore restore the order dated 23rd March 2020, and in continuation of the order dated 8th March 2021, direct that the period of limitation as prescribed under any general or special laws, I emphasize any general or special laws, in respect of all judicial and or quasi judicial proceedings, whether condonable or not, shall stand extended till further orders.
Till 15th of July.
Sir. So my question is with regard to
All.
whether this implies for extending the period of
I read this decision to have effect in respect of all matters wherever the limitation is prescribed.
including
that is a-
148,
Pardon?
including 148 notices, sir.
For orders.
Sir, that's what I want to read out the next para. It's very,
Yes.
very relevant.
Yes.
It is further clarified that the period from 14th March 2021 till further orders shall also stand excluded in computing the period prescribed under section 23(4) and 29A of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996, section 12A of the Commercial Courts Act 2015, and provisions of B and C of section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, and any other laws which prescribe period of limitation for instituting proceedings, outer limits within which the court or tribunal can condone delay and termination of proceedings. So can I interpret or can
I'll have to read it. What you say prima facie appears to be correct. I have not given because हम तो अपना जो अच्छा लगता है वही लेते हैं ना. सार को गहे लहे थोथा दे उड़ाए.
Any other question from any other person, bhai?
I would like to ask.
Mr. Varadarajan.
Yes, Mr. Varadarajan, sir.
Sir, I just regarding that 5 crore limit, you just can repeat that because
Mr. Varadarajan, you are from Chennai?
No, I am from Kerala actually, Palghat.
Okay, sir. Yes.
मैं पालघाट का हूँ लेकिन कलकत्ता में ही जन्म है, कलकत्ता में सब
अरे
कुछ
वाह, you are more of a Bengali than.
हाँ, more of Bengal. You can call me Marwadi also, no problem.
Yes.
एक तो 5 करोड़ वाला जो लिमिट आपने बोला वो एक वो है, और एक जो हमारे मतलब we have got one charitable and philanthropic activities as you rightly said, वो एक तो टर्नओवर वाला बोल रहे थे, तो दूसरा जो है कैश डोनेशंस का क्या लिमिट है उसमें 88 एक एसोसिएशन में 80G का नहीं है, एक दूसरा में है हम लोग का. तो now that the new provision you have to whatever donations you have received, that is there any limit with which we have to give the names along with the PAN numbers etc. That is the what is the limit, time limit, number 1. Number 2, ये जो 5 करोड़ वाला बोल रहे हैं exemption का जो बोल रहे थे,
yes.
तो वो थोड़ा सा clarify कर दीजिए तो कि whether we, and then thirdly whether the the hundi collections, people give 100 rupees, now we at the end of 3 months or 6 months we take it out. So what is the actual how will we deal with those donations? Supposing it amounts to let us say 50,000 in 6 months, how can we do that now? Whether we are supposed to do it every month or whether we have to clear it every 6 months, how can we?
No. I mean, for that there is no time limit. But then, of course, when you have to prepare your accounts, at least it should be on annual basis so that you can account it for.
Yes, up to March we are doing it.
Yes.
And
So
before that also,
so
once
there
in
is
6 months we do it.
Yes, that's all right. Now, regarding the 5 crores, the aggregate of all institutions under a particular trust or society which exists solely for educational purpose or for medical institutions existing solely for philanthropic purposes. Okay. Now, it should not be more than 5 crores. In case it is in excess of 5 crores, then you have to go in for approval, either under 1023C6 or 4 or under section 12AB.
Okay. Our temple is associated registered with section 12A, that is there, and we have got the registration now, provisional registration certificate also.
Yes.
But so what the turnover, as you said, it does not exceed more than 1 crore actually.
But then yours is a temple. Temple is not covered because a charitable institution existing solely for educational purpose.
No, it is for religious activity as well as for education also. We are socially relevant temple actually. Both.
So there may be problem because section 1023C, I mean, it doesn't cover the religious institutions. It says that charitable institution existing solely for educational purposes. So there may be a problematic situation for you.
Okay.
Any other question?
Sir, namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
सर नमस्कार, अजय अग्रवाल एडवोकेट रेवाड़ी से बोल रहा हूँ।
रेवाड़ी से?
जी सर।
हाँ जी बोलिए।
पहचान लिया सर?
हाँ हाँ जी जी
सर मेरे दो छोटे छोटे सवाल हैं
जी।
कि जैसे कुछ स्कूल्स हैं जिनकी ग्रॉस एसेट्स 2 करोड़ के नीचे हैं।
स्कूल है या एक ट्रस्ट के अंदर एक
ट्रस्ट के अंडर 2 करोड़ से नीचे टर्नओवर के स्कूल हैं।
हाँ
और एक्सक्लूसिवली वो जो है एजुकेशनल वर्क ही कर रहे हैं
हाँ
और 12A में रजिस्टर्ड है।
हम्म।
तो क्या हमारे को अब उसकी दोबारा से जो न्यू रजिस्ट्रेशन है उसके जाना चाहिए या नहीं जाना चाहिए?
नहीं जाना चाहिए, वो तो खैर आप एसेस करेंगे। मैं तो आपको ये बता सकता हूँ कि 2 और 2 4 करोड़ रुपए आपकी एग्रीगेट रिसीट्स हैं, यू एग्जिस्ट सोली फॉर एजुकेशनल पर्पस, देन आप नहीं भी जाएंगे तो भी चलेगा, तो भी आपकी इनकम क्वालिफाई करेगी। ठीक है ना
सर मेरा दूसरा इसी से जुड़ा हुआ सवाल ये है कि
हाँ।
क्या अगर हम जैसे अब रजिस्ट्रेशन के लिए जाते हैं सपोज, तो क्या वो हमारे को एज ए न्यू क्लाइंट ट्रीट करेंगे या पिछला हमारा रजिस्ट्रेशन जो ऑलरेडी है उसका हमारे को कुछ बेनिफिट भी मिलेगा?
नहीं, आपका वेदर यू आर रजिस्टर्ड अंडर विच सेक्शन?
सर 12A।
12AA, then
जी
and that registration is effective on 1st of April.
राइट राइट सर।
Oh, so then you apply, you file form 10AC, or what is that form, you will get it.
तो मतलब रजिस्ट्रेशन हम के लिए हम अप्लाई कर दें उसके
Yes,
लिए?
yes, yes. It will be granted without any inquiry.
ठीक है सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Any other question from any person?
Sir, I am Manish from Rashtra Udyog. There is a small question for Dr. Gupta.
Manish from
Rashtra Udyog Limited,
Calcutta only.
from Calcutta. My father is a member of the Bharat Chamber of Commerce also.
Okay.
It's a small question. We have a charitable trust in which, when this new statute did not come in, last year we had already applied under 12A online. There was no response and nothing was done. We are sitting on it. Do we have to again reapply?
Yes,
in
you have to.
this scenario?
Yes, you'll have to reapply, or it can be taken as an application because that is pending. So
Yes.
under 12AC, I mean, let me tell you the section under clause small 6, so it will be taken as pending.
Okay.
And therefore, in either case, at least 1 month prior to the commence. Yes, it will be treated as pending because under section 12AB, subsection 2, it is mentioned all applications pending before the principal commissioner on which no order has been passed.
Yeah.
Before this date on which this section is coming to force shall be deemed to be application made under this clause. So it will automatically be deemed to have been made, and then you will be granted provisional registration.
So we did not do anything right now.
You need not
escalating to do escalating that earlier application.
That itself will be Rajesh Selosar ने बता दिया, इंदौर से हमारे मित्र हैं, अपने आप ही एप्लीकेशन मान लिया जाएगा, वो 12AB सबसेक्शन 2 में लिखा हुआ है।
Unfortunately, we got a call from the department asking us to withdraw the application at that time कि आप fresh apply बाद में कीजिएगा. We did not do that. We kept on with our application.
So your application is pending, and therefore they are bound to consider it for the purpose of provisional registration under section 12AB subsection 2.
Correct. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Any other question? 1 or 2 questions only. So we can wind up, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, it was really a wonderful session. Gupta ji, we are very much obliged to you.
अरे sir,
And your precious and valuable time. आपका जो busy schedule है उसमें से आपने इतना time निकाला. We are very much obliged to you. And really, it was a very wonderful session. Very well covered all aspects of the reassessment provisions as well as the provisions of charitable trust. I convey my heartiest thanks to you for very lucidly answering all the questions put forward before you. And we are much more obliged for the reason that you have stated that you will always be available to the chamber and will spare some precious time whenever we will call you, subject to, of course, your limitations. But we request you to be available to us so that we can have your valuable opinion and valuable discussions at every moment. We can be enriched. And with that, I thanks once again to Sri Gupta ji and to all the participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
ये है राकेश गुप्ता, दिल्ली से मिलता है तो ना, आजकल तो खूब वो ले रहा है ऑनलाइन क्लासेस क्या ले रहा है